Greetings again, friends. Happy Independence Day, or July 4th. Now, this video should post on July 4th, and it is a wonderful holiday for us in the United States. But this got me thinking about freedom and all that we can think about and enjoy with freedom, or the danger of freedom. So, following up a little on my last video, which was the danger of honor, you should go back and look at that video if you want to understand that. Today's video is on the danger of freedom. Now, freedom is when you do not have compulsion to do something from any other force or authority. And you can define it in different ways, but you basically get the idea that you are free from any need for some other thing. And as I thought about freedom, I was just really thinking about aspects that could come as a danger when you do have freedom, even thinking about how it is here in the United States. Now, before we get into that, let me just say, please subscribe to this channel. I am seeing God work in many ways as I speak internationally, and am seeing some more people gradually come to subscribe to this channel, and I want the word to get out. So if you haven't, make sure you subscribe, hit the notification bell too there, and just like this video as you do that, and I'll remind you again at the end. And I want to say a disclaimer, because this is around July 4th and people seem to be excited, and it's possible that even as I'm recording here, you'll hear bangs because of fireworks going off, as people are doing that even in my neighborhood, and have been for about a week or so now, off and on. So that is possible if you hear that bang. But I wanted to get into this now and really thinking about freedom. Now, go back and look at the video from last year that I did around July 4th. And that was just speaking of the right to liberty. And I was dealing with the constitutional rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And you can see from what has happened in America that there are many challenges to freedom that are in our country because of the current administration in power that seems to be taking away, again, many freedoms, or they are at risk. So this is a challenge for us to think this through in America, and of course for anyone as they think about it. Now, there are spiritual factors that come in to the challenges against freedom. We know that God wants us to be free, and He created us as human beings as free moral agents. And of course we know that we chose wrong, or Adam did, and we all choose wrong in Adam. So we see how that has played out in the human race. But as I thought about the spiritual nature of this, I did a video that also related to freedom, and maybe you didn't see that. I know it didn't get quite as many views, so go look at that one, called Speak in the Freedom, as I dealt with the spiritual warfare in Ephesians 6 and an outline from things I had thought about there. But today I just wanted to get into this aspect of the danger of freedom. And I thought about three things in relation to what freedom can lead to. Now, I looked it up on Google, and there were some messages about the danger of freedom, and one of the things you'll see is that there's a lot of talk about the danger of freedom in reference to social justice. Now, that would be somehow the danger freedom gives that people have said that leads to racism and you could look at things I've done before, maybe even the more recent video I did when on being woke and I woke up. You can look at that one and understand maybe some of that more. But I want to talk about these three things that are a danger in freedom. And a danger, that is, you can remember them by these words beginning with A. The first danger of freedom is apathy. Now, this means when you don't have any care, and even you could use the word L and say lethargic. You're lazy, you're lethargic, you just don't care. People who have freedom often become self-centered and they don't care about other people or other things as they should. And that's true for many Americans, that they just simply care about themselves and seem to think that the world revolves around them and aren't looking out to help other people anywhere. And so apathy can be a danger of freedom, where you take things for granted and you just become lazy and lethargic. We could look at some verses there, and a good place to go to is Ephesians 4:17. It says, "This I say, therefore, and testify in the Lord, that you should no longer walk as the rest of the Gentiles walk in the futility of their mind." Now remember, Satan is trying to blind the mind. And the verse that we have very clearly there is 2 Corinthians 4:4. And it says, "Whose minds the God of this age has blinded, who do not believe, lest the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine on them." So Satan tries to blind the mind. And look back at Ephesians 4 and verse 18, and it talks about this blindness. It says, "Having their understanding darkened, being alienated from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them, because of the blindness of their heart." Now, freedom gives people this opportunity to just live for theirself and be blind and ignorant. You can be ignorant of history. You can choose not to study it. Most people don't seem to care about history. You can not even think about biblical history and what God has done, and His Word, of course, records that. But many people just take advantage of freedom and take it for granted and aren't students of history and maybe don't even see the warnings that are happening to threaten freedom. So this result of ignorance is spelled out even more in the next verse there, as it speaks of here in Ephesians 4. And it says in verse 19, "Who being past feeling have given themselves over to lewdness, to work all uncleanness with greediness." So these are people that are living in a way where they're insensitive to moral truth or apathetic to it. So that's that first danger of freedom, apathy. Now the second danger of freedom goes to what could be considered abandon. That is, you abandon freedom because you have too much care, or it would be legalism. Now, let me explain this a little because you may not understand what I'm saying here. When someone gets free, sometimes they don't know what to do with the freedom they have. And so they feel more secure somehow with the bondage they were in. Think about someone who's been abused, where they keep going back to the person who abused them. Or even as the Bible says right here in Galatians chapter 5, where it's discussing a lot about freedom. Look at what is said in Galatians 5:1. Stand fast, therefore, in the liberty by which Christ has made us free, and do not be entangled again with a yoke of bondage. Now, spiritually speaking, one thing that happened in early Christianity, as Paul was writing to this church of Galatia, was that there were people who were trying to add to the gospel, or Jewish people in particular, which were saying you couldn't be saved unless you kept the law or were circumcised in particular was one thing, and did other elements of the law. Now, if you add to the gospel, it is technically what is called legalism, and that's not the grace that is described in the gospel. But when you put your faith in Jesus Christ, you were made free from the law. Now, you are not free from moral law or even what James talked about, which we'll look at here in a minute. But when you're free, Jesus pays for your sin, and he gave his life so that we could be free. Free first spiritually, and then emotionally, and even physically. We have that freedom. And this freedom is something that I described and God gave me when he gave me that poem, To Be Free. So go and look at that poem if you want to see the thing that talks more about freedom and what people seek to have freedom. But going back to here in what I'm speaking of in Galatians and what I referred to in James, we live in this age of grace, and yet some people want to get back under the Mosaic law, or to have a list of things that you should do to be right or even saved, and different ways that people will add to the gospel through their own works. Now, James says that in this age of grace, we are under the royal law, or the law of liberty, not the law and the elements of the Mosaic law, but the law of liberty. Look at a couple of verses there in James. Let's look at first James 2:18 or 2:8. And it says, if you really fulfill the royal law, according to the scripture, you shall love your neighbor as yourself, you do well. So there he refers to the law, in particular, the royal law, which is that summary Jesus talked about of the 10 Commandments. And of course, loving God and loving others is that summary. So he refers to the royal law as this law of loving your neighbor there in verse 8. And then later in James 2:12, he says, so speak and so do as those who will be judged by the law of liberty. Okay, so you see that you do not need to abandon freedom for the law or some regulation, as many people feel more comfortable to do that, or getting yoked back up to that bondage that they were in, thinking like the children of Israel when they got freedom from Egypt. They started complaining against God and wanted to go back to the bondage that they had in Egypt. Of course, God got them out of that thinking, but that's the way that they were thinking. And sometimes freedom leads to that. The third thing that freedom can lead to as a danger is when you allow. And what I mean there is that you have too little care or license. Now, this means that you use freedom as a license to just fulfill your own sinful or fleshly desires. Look at how the Bible speaks of this. Here in Galatians 5:13, it says, for you, brethren, have been called to liberty. Only do not use liberty as an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another. So some people think that they can have more grace of God because we live in an age of grace if they just allow themselves to sin, and this body will just die in its sin, so they may as well just live however they want. But Paul addressed this clearly and very strongly. In Romans chapter 6, verses 1 and 2, he says this, "What shall we say then? Shall we continue in sin that grace may abound? Certainly not. How shall we who died to sin live any longer in it?" So you see, Paul said that grace is not that way. You shouldn't frustrate grace. You should not use grace as a license to sin. Jesus even said in that respect, he said in John 8:34, Jesus answered them, "Most assuredly I say to you, whoever commits sin is a slave of sin." So it's getting you back under bondage again if you simply use allowance as a way that you give yourself license to continue to sin. Now that's that third danger that can come with freedom. So the three dangers I talked about again here are apathy, where there's no care, or lethargy; abandon, which is too much care or legalism, and you don't want that freedom; and then three, allow, where you allow too much in your life and in your flesh, and you care really too little or have license to do what you just want to. Okay, so that is just the thoughts that God gave me as I was thinking about freedom and the danger of freedom. But friends, true freedom is to know Jesus Christ and to not be enslaved to sin, but to be able to serve Christ and to love Him and to love other people. That is true freedom, and that is what God gives. And as Jesus said in John 8:36, therefore, if the Son makes you free, you shall be free indeed. Oh, friends, I trust that you know Jesus Christ, that you believe that He died on the cross for your sins, was buried, and rose again. He did that because He loves you, and He wants you to be free from any bondage of sin. Oh, like this video, share it with other people. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you'll be ready for the next video as the Lord leads. Thank you for watching.